Hey guys, this is going to be my latest Frightfest 2020 review. On this video I will be talking about Two Heads Creek, great title, the Australian movie, which I saw yesterday, so thought I'd give a quick sort of review to. This one will be a bit short, I think, just because this is mostly a comedy, kind of a black comedy with some horror like moments worked in towards the end and stuff, but I think with comedies you end up talking about the jokes a lot really and just picking out certain scenes, so I don't think I'll ramble as much as I normally do on these videos. Famous last words, of course. So the setup is that you have a brother and sister living in England, and it's deliberately like a post-Brexit England, and they originally thought their mother was Polish. Well, she was Polish. Sorry, that's the wrong way to phrase it. But they thought then the woman. I'm making a mess of this already. Basically, the woman who they called mother for years is Polish, so they were brought up with a Polish type background, and because of it being post-Brexit and certain things, they're sort of having issues with like racism locally, and it sort of digs into that kind of thing. And the mother has recently died, and you have these two very different sort of siblings. You have the character of Norman, who's basically continuing like the family's butcher business, and he's less traditional as a kind of a masculine type figure. He's sort of anti-masculine. He's more kind of nervous and mannered and a bit more modern in a way. And then you have his more kind of self-obsessed shadow sort of sister, who kind of her big aim was to become like a celebrity, so she's gone into acting, and you immediately have that sort of like dynamic between the two where they're polar opposites, and the film has a lot of fun with that. But they start to find out then, hey, the woman who they think isn't their mother, or they thought was their mother, isn't their mother maybe, then they were actually adopted, and they find out then their adopted mother, or their real mother, I'm ballsing this up so bad, I'm sorry, their real mother, who's played by Kerry Armstrong, who's brilliant actress, Australian actress, then she is based in Two Heads Creek, and so they travel there because they want to meet their real mother. And it's one of these classic type horror types out where it's a fish out of water, backward like Aussie type town, and I mean weird things start to happen. Basically there's just all these strange little secrets, all these like quirky kind of but very extreme sort of characters at times, a lot of colourful language, and they start finding out then there's something going on, there's some sort of cover up, because they're told shortly after they arrive that the mother is dead, but they start finding out things that would maybe contradict that. So it's a clever sort of idea where they're kind of using the backdrop to Brexit and kind of comparing in a way their life in Britain and then coming to this Australian type town. But as I said, it's a classic sort of horror type trope where you have these outsiders from another culture coming into like this in a way more traditional sort of like Aussie type town. I know Australia is a big country and it's very diverse, so obviously I'm not suggesting everywhere in Australia is like this, and it's played up as a farce. It's like kind of really over the top and sort of a black like comic farce is a good way to describe this film. But yeah, I had an absolute blast with it. I thought the two leads were really, really good. I think they're brother and sister in real life, which really helps. I think brilliant chemistry. They just bounce off each other so well, and I think they each bring something to the kind of part, and they kind of grow over the film, particularly the sister. But she's so much fun. The actress, I think, does a really, really great job. And I think what's great about this is then sometimes when you hear about, oh, it's a post-Brexit type horror comedy. You're worried it's going to be a bit heavy-handed, a bit too heavy on the politics, but they do actually keep it light and entertaining and just go with it. And it's a good, I'd say, to use a pun in a way, because of the butcher connection, it's a good meaty romp, and they do play off that connection every chance they get. You know, there's like gory bits of meat being cut in the opening credits, and then that plays into the film later as we get towards the end and the threat appears. But yeah, the two leads are brilliant. There's some great dialogue between them. They both feel very natural. But I actually think, in an odd sort of way, you can't say it's a positive spin on like kind of racism or negativity or kind of just outdated sort of attitudes, but they do play with it and make it very funny within the context of the film. And so you get like the early stuff where you just get a rude sort of teenage girl in the street, or young girl, kind of just being very racist, and they're painting, graffiti on the side of the butchers. And at one point she just says, you're a Polish pig with no kind of dick. But it's his response which kind of makes it funny. He politely just says, oh, okay, yeah, say hi to your mum for me. So that kind of makes the scene. And then later on, the sister deals with it in a very different way, which is really funny. She basically just tells them to fuck off, which is great. And I love kind of the way she's always like sort of mocking him for his masculinity, or lack of, in her way, and he's obviously trying to defend himself, but she's saying things like, you've got lesbo hair. And I know when I say this on this video it all sounds bad, but in the film it is very funny. They make it really entertaining, and I do think there is something cute about their relationship, the way, although she puts her foot in her mouth and is just so clueless about how to come across, I think she does, in her own way, kind of defend him and stand up for, like, her brother. There's a great scene when they're in this town and they're not been there long, and you get this whole joke about the locals being very, like, old-fashioned and masculine and very kind of in your face. And at one point, one of them, and the actor I recognise from Neighbours, this is another thing about a lot of Aussie films, you can't really go long before a cast member from Neighbours showing up, but he's one of the locals, and he just like throws Norman a beer, and Norman like barely catches it and like staggers, and then doesn't really drink it. And then there's this thing with the sister where she actually stands up for him by putting herself out there, because it says, looks like he's got a vagina, one of the locals says, and the sister Annabelle says, no, but I do, throw me that can. So throws him, and she drinks, and it's like, oh, well, she's all right. And then Norman's off to the side, kind of just having a glass of wine. It's pretty funny, but there's a lot of like eccentric sort of characters which make it funny. There's the kind of the guy at custom who obviously like checks them in and stuff, and he's kind of putting them under the microscope. And actually the line of the film probably comes from that, when he's like really just questioning their credentials and can they really come in. And I love the way Annabelle cuts him down with, I'll have to compose a very negative tweet about you, and then he just sort of backs off. But another great thing about that scene is that when they say, well, we're going to Two Heads Creek, he then just takes a pause, like this dramatic pause. Is like, it's almost like, why would anyone want to go there? And I love that, because it's kind of like he's like that kind of stereotypical old man of the film, almost that old guy who always warns the teens, don't go in there, or don't go to the town. He's almost playing with that role, but throughout the scene it's kind of like, yeah, this guy is a bit shady. So they play that up with a lot of funny characters, but they do kind of show that the tour guide, when they're on the buses, she's very funny. She has a lot of great one-liners, and I think there's a lot of macabre and filthy humour in there, but the film does make it very funny. I won't go into too many details because you just have to sit back and enjoy the fun and the farcical nature. And as I said, I would just be talking about jokes, but there's this very like outdated, like racist sort of character who's a teacher, and I think at one point because there's a deal made about there's this guy who runs the town who's like this mysterious sort of German character, and at one point, although he's kind of running things and in charge, like the racist does sort of question, well, you're a European sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch of gags about these kind of outdated sort of Aussie cultures and their reactions to like European sort of thing. But yeah, it is a lot of fun. There's some great characters, some great one-liners. And then it builds to the comedy or the set pieces, the horror stuff where there is this threat. But I was going to say, yeah, the racist teacher, he does make a point of saying about, because you get like these Chinese immigrants and they're kind of visiting the place as well. And when it becomes clear that, hey, not surprisingly, they're trying to keep these immigrants here and trying to kill them or contain them, it's like, hey, and this is really offensive, which is the point, but calls one of them a spring roll, one of the spring rolls as escape. I'm so sorry, but hey, it is what it is in the film. And then you get to the gore stuff, and there's a really great, cool cameo from Kerry Armstrong, who's just brilliant as the mother when she shows up, and just has some kick-ass sort of scene. It definitely delivers on the gore front in the back half of the film, moves at a good pace, it's really funny. Also, there's a great, like, sort of 70s rock sort of soundtrack to it. I really like the way they use the music. It probably runs out of steam a little bit, and by the end it might just become this thing of, well, they're just throwing all these wacky stuff at you, and it maybe doesn't quite sustain itself for all of the film, but it's certainly a fun little romp with a quite nice little relationship in the central parts, and very funny, there are satisfying horror moments as well, and some great comedy. Because I think because I watched like the interviews before, and the lead actress actually said, well, these characters are shockingly quite true to life, which is sort of shocking. But I thought it was a good way to do an immigration type horror comedy, because I think it does use the horror tropes and plays with them. So the idea then they're in this backwater town, but they're almost keeping like immigrants there, and it's almost like the immigrants are the fish out of water type characters, and they are the potential sort of threat, or they're in danger. They're not the threat, that's the wrong way, but they're the ones in danger, and it becomes about that. But good fun, really entertaining romp, and overall I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I think I had a good time with it, and I think the central two are what partly made it, and then you get some fun characters to kind of bounce off them and some great lines. So yeah, good overall fun. Two Heads Creek, I recommend checking it out. If you've seen it at Frightfest or watched it on the virtual Frightfest, let me know what you thought of it, whether you agree or differ. And just one more thing to add, it will be available on September the 7th on all digital platforms. Well, some digital platforms. So you don't have too long to wait. September the 7th, this film will be hitting online as I try and find the right phrase. So yeah, good fun in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts, and I can tell you my next Fright Fest review, which will be coming film soon, is of Acrolash, which also was screening on Sunday. So thanks for listening, and look out for more Fright Fest reviews. See you guys soon.